Do not scroll away. There is something unfolding behind the silence you have been living with, and it is far more significant than you realize. Someone who carries deep feelings for you has reached a moment where keeping everything hidden has become more difficult than speaking the truth. And yet, the truth they want to share is not what you have been expecting. For a long time, you believed that the distance meant indifference. You wondered whether your kindness had been forgotten. You questioned whether your patience had been wasted. Some nights you sat alone with thoughts you never shared with anyone else. You smiled for others while carrying questions inside your heart. Questions that seemed to echo through empty rooms. Questions that followed you into quiet mornings. Questions that appeared again during prayers whispered when nobody was listening. But there was something happening beyond your view. Something that began long before this moment. A conversation. A realization. A growing awareness that could no longer be ignored. The person connected to your heart has been carrying words they never found the courage to say. Not because they did not care. Not because they forgot. But because they were facing a truth within themselves first. And that truth was uncomfortable. Sometimes people stay silent, not because they lack feeling, but because they fear what honesty will require of them. They fear change. They fear vulnerability. They fear discovering that what they feel is far deeper than they planned. The strange thing is, the silence that confused you was creating pressure inside them. Every unanswered thought. Every memory they tried to dismiss. Every moment they pretended not to care. It all continued building beneath the surface. Like rain gathering behind dark clouds. And recently, something happened. A small moment. One that would have looked ordinary to everyone else. Yet it changed the direction of their thoughts completely. A simple reminder. A familiar memory. A name spoken unexpectedly. And suddenly, feelings they had been avoiding returned all at once. Not gradually. Not gently. All at once. They found themselves reflecting on moments they thought they had moved beyond. The sound of your voice. The kindness you showed when nobody else noticed. The patience you demonstrated when others would have walked away. And for the first time in a long while, they stopped running from those memories. If this sounds familiar. If you have spent months, perhaps even years, wondering whether your quiet sacrifices mattered. Please hear this carefully. Nothing given from a sincere heart is ever wasted. Some seeds take longer to bloom than others. Some answers arrive only after enough growth has taken place. You were never being prepared for disappointment. You were being prepared for clarity. Yet what happened next was never meant to be revealed so soon. Because while they were sorting through these emotions, another person entered the story. Someone close to them. Someone whose opinion carried unexpected weight. And during a conversation that seemed completely ordinary at first, a question was asked. A question so simple that nobody in the room realized its power. But the moment they heard it, they froze. The room became quiet. Their expression changed. And for several seconds, they could not answer. Because the question forced them to confront the one truth they had avoided for far too long. The truth about you. The truth about what your presence has meant in their life. The truth about why they still think about you when nobody is around. And what they finally admitted in that conversation would begin setting events into motion. Events that are still unfolding right now. But that was not the moment that changed everything. The moment that changed everything came later. After the conversation ended. After everyone else had left. After the lights were dim and the distractions disappeared. They found themselves alone. Sitting quietly. Looking at something connected to you. And what happened in those next few minutes revealed a secret they have hidden from almost everyone. A secret that explains the silence. A secret that explains the distance. A secret that explains why they suddenly feel compelled to tell you the truth now. And when that hidden truth finally surfaced, they realized there was no turning back. Because the next decision they made involved something they had avoided for longer than anyone knew. For a while, they simply sat there in silence. No distractions. No voices around them. No obligations demanding their attention. Just stillness. And sometimes it is in stillness that the heart becomes impossible to ignore. The memory they were holding seemed ordinary on the surface. Yet the longer they looked at it, the more emotions began to rise. Not regret. Not sadness. Something deeper. Recognition. For the first time, they stopped asking themselves whether they should think about you. Instead, they began asking why they had never been able to stop. That realization unsettled them. Because it challenged a story they had been telling themselves for a very long time. They had convinced themselves that moving forward meant moving away. That healing required distance. That unanswered feelings would eventually disappear if enough time passed. But feelings rooted in truth rarely vanish. They simply wait. They wait beneath responsibilities. They wait beneath distractions. They wait beneath pride. And eventually, they ask to be acknowledged. That night, those feelings demanded to be acknowledged. What nobody else noticed was that something inside them shifted. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Quietly. Yet some of the most important changes happen that way. A door opens within the heart before it ever opens in the outside world. And that door had finally begun to open. But there is another part of this story you have not seen. While you were carrying your own questions. While you were wondering whether your prayers had gone unheard. While you were trying to make peace with uncertainty. You were changing too. You may not realize it. But the version of you that exists today is not the same person who first entered this journey. You have grown stronger. Wiser. More patient. More compassionate. You have learned how to survive disappointments that once would have broken you. You have learned how to carry hope without demanding immediate answers. And that growth matters more than you know. Because timing is not only about another person becoming ready. It is also about you becoming prepared to receive what once would have arrived too soon. There were lessons hidden inside the waiting. Strength hidden inside the loneliness. Peace hidden inside the uncertainty. And although those seasons were difficult, they were not meaningless. Nothing has been wasted. Not a single tear. Not a single prayer. Not a single night when you wondered if anyone truly understood your heart. Every experience was shaping something important. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because while they were beginning to confront their feelings, someone else noticed the change before they did. A family member. Someone observant. Someone who had watched them carefully over time. At first, it was only small details. A sudden smile at an unexpected moment. A thoughtful silence after hearing your name. A distant look in their eyes when certain memories surfaced. Tiny signs. Easy to miss. Yet impossible to ignore once seen. Eventually, that family member asked a question. Not an accusation. Not a confrontation. Just a simple question spoken with genuine curiosity. And once again, the room became quiet. The answer took longer than expected. Far longer. Because some truths become obvious only when someone else gently places them in front of us. That family member saw something they had been trying not to see. And after listening carefully, they said words that would remain in their thoughts for days afterward. Words that echoed through every attempt to dismiss their feelings. Words that challenged every excuse. Words that carried an unexpected wisdom. If this message resonates with you, there is something you need to remember. Sometimes the confirmation you seek arrives through people who are not directly part of the story. A stranger. A friend. A family member. A quiet conversation. Guidance often appears through unexpected voices. And that is exactly what happened here. Because after hearing those words, they began looking at the situation differently. Not through fear. Not through confusion. But through honesty. And honesty can be both beautiful and uncomfortable. It reveals what we truly value. It reveals what we truly miss. It reveals who continues to occupy space within our hearts. For several days afterward, they wrestled with a decision. Should they continue pretending everything was fine? Should they keep their feelings hidden? Should they remain silent and allow uncertainty to continue? Or should they finally speak? The struggle was real. Because speaking the truth often requires courage. Not the courage to face another person. The courage to face ourselves. Yet the more they resisted, the clearer something became. The truth was no longer asking for permission. It was asking to be expressed. And then, a completely unexpected event occurred. A moment nobody planned. A moment nobody could have predicted. A moment that transformed quiet reflection into urgent action. The kind of moment that makes someone realize they may have waited long enough. The kind of moment that changes hesitation into determination. And when it happened, they immediately thought of one person. You. But what triggered that realization was connected to something they discovered. Something hidden in plain sight all along. Something that revealed exactly why they have been unable to let go. And when they uncovered it, they whispered a name they had not intended to speak. And when they uncovered it, they whispered a name they had not intended to speak. For a moment, they simply sat there. Almost surprised by what had just happened. The room was quiet. The world outside continued moving as it always had. Yet inside them, something felt different. Because your name had not emerged from memory alone. It had come from a place much deeper. A place where honesty lives. A place where excuses cannot survive. And once spoken, it became impossible to pretend that nothing had changed. They tried returning to their routine. They tried focusing on responsibilities. They tried convincing themselves that this realization would pass. But every path seemed to lead back to the same question. Why now? Why, after all this time, were these feelings becoming stronger instead of weaker? The answer was closer than they realized. You see, many people spend years searching for extraordinary signs while overlooking the quiet truth standing directly in front of them. And one quiet truth had been present all along. You represented something rare. Not perfection. Not fantasy. Something far more meaningful. Peace. In a world filled with noise, you brought calm. In moments of uncertainty, you offered understanding. In situations where others demanded, you often gave grace. Those qualities leave a deeper mark on the heart than dramatic moments ever can. And suddenly they understood something they had never fully understood before. What they missed was not merely a person. It was how they felt when your presence touched their life. That realization stayed with them. Morning after morning. Night after night. And the more they reflected, the clearer everything became. Yet another mystery was beginning to unfold. Because while they were confronting these emotions, someone else was quietly observing from a distance. Someone who cared about their future. Someone who wanted to see them happy. Someone who had remained silent for a long time. This individual had noticed patterns that others overlooked. The hesitation. The unfinished sentences. The way certain conversations always seemed to circle back to the same subject. Eventually, that observer reached a conclusion. A conclusion that would soon be shared. But before that conversation could happen, something unexpected appeared. A reminder. Small. Simple. Almost insignificant. Yet powerful enough to stop them in their tracks. Perhaps you have experienced moments like this yourself. A familiar song. A photograph. A phrase spoken by a stranger. Something ordinary that suddenly carries extraordinary meaning. This was one of those moments. And as they stared at that reminder, a realization settled over them. Not all distance is separation. Sometimes distance is preparation. Sometimes two people must travel through separate seasons before they can fully understand what they mean to one another. If you have felt forgotten, hear this carefully. Being unseen is not the same as being unimportant. Many of the most valuable things in life grow quietly before anyone recognizes their worth. The same is true for healing. The same is true for faith. The same is true for meaningful connections. And perhaps the same has been true for you. Because while you have been waiting for answers, something has been changing beneath the surface. Not only within them. Within circumstances themselves. Pieces have been moving. Hearts have been softening. Perspectives have been shifting. And people who once viewed things one way are beginning to see them differently. What nobody noticed at first was how quickly this transformation was spreading. One conversation led to another. One reflection sparked another question. One realization opened the door to several more. And suddenly, matters that had remained untouched for months were being discussed again. Not publicly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Thoughtfully. Carefully. The kind of discussions that happen when people begin considering possibilities they once dismissed. Yet what happened next was never meant to be revealed so soon. Because during one of those conversations, a question emerged that nobody expected. A question about the future. A question about happiness. A question about what truly matters when everything else fades away. And the answer they gave surprised even them. Not because it was complicated. Because it was honest. For the first time, they stopped speaking from fear. For the first time, they stopped protecting themselves behind uncertainty. For the first time, they allowed their heart to answer. And the response created a silence that lingered long after the conversation ended. The people listening exchanged glances. Not because they were shocked. Because suddenly everything made sense. Pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered for so long were beginning to fit together. And then came the statement. A single statement spoken by someone in that room. Words that would continue echoing in their mind for days. Words that carried unexpected wisdom. Words that revealed something nobody had fully understood until that moment. Because according to this person, the greatest obstacle had never been circumstances. It had never been timing. It had never even been distance. The greatest obstacle was something far more personal. Something hidden within them. Something they were finally ready to confront. And once they acknowledged it, everything started changing. The way they viewed the past. The way they viewed you. The way they viewed the future. But that was not the revelation that changed everything. The revelation came later that evening. After everyone had gone home. After the conversations had ended. After the lights dimmed and silence returned. They opened something they had not looked at in a very long time. Something connected to a memory. Something connected to a promise. Something connected to a moment they thought they had left behind forever. And hidden inside it was a truth so undeniable that within minutes, they found themselves preparing to make a decision they can no longer delay. A decision that involves reaching out and revealing what they have been afraid to admit all this time. A decision that involves reaching out and revealing what they have been afraid to admit all this time. The moment that realization settled into their heart, everything around them seemed unusually still. Not because the world had stopped, but because their excuses had. For so long, uncertainty had provided a place to hide. As long as nothing was said, nothing had to be risked. As long as silence remained, difficult questions could be avoided. But now silence no longer felt safe. It felt heavy. It felt unfinished. And most of all, it felt dishonest. They looked again at the memory resting before them. A memory connected to a season of life that had shaped them more than they ever admitted. The details were simple. Yet the emotions attached to them were powerful. Sometimes it is not the grand moments we carry forever. Sometimes it is a conversation. A smile. A gesture of kindness offered when nobody else noticed. The smallest acts often leave the deepest impressions. And as they reflected on those moments, another truth emerged. You had affected their life in ways they never fully acknowledged. Not through dramatic declarations. Not through pressure. Not through demands. But through consistency. Through patience. Through the quiet strength you carried even when your own heart was hurting. That realization brought something unexpected. Gratitude. The kind of gratitude that appears when someone finally understands the value of what they once took for granted. And gratitude has a remarkable way of changing perspective. It shifts attention away from what was lost and toward what still remains possible. Yet another mystery was unfolding at the same time. Because while they were coming to these conclusions, a conversation was taking place elsewhere. A conversation they knew nothing about. A conversation involving people whose opinions would soon matter more than anyone expected. The discussion began casually. No one intended it to become significant. No one realized where it would lead. But sometimes life changes direction through conversations that seem ordinary at first. One person mentioned your name. Another person responded. Then another memory surfaced. Then another. Before long, stories were being shared. Observations were being exchanged. And something surprising happened. The image people held of you became clearer. Not weaker. Stronger. Not smaller. More meaningful. Those present began recognizing qualities that had gone unnoticed before. Your resilience. Your compassion. Your ability to continue showing kindness even after disappointment. The way you remained respectful when others might have become bitter. And as these observations accumulated, the atmosphere shifted. A new understanding was forming. One that nobody had anticipated. If you have ever felt misunderstood, listen closely. There are seasons when your character is being noticed even when nobody speaks about it. There are moments when the seeds of respect are growing quietly beneath the surface. You may not see them. You may not hear them. But that does not mean they are absent. And this was one of those moments. Because while you continued living your life, your influence was speaking on your behalf. Your actions were telling a story. Your character was creating an impression. And that impression was reaching places you never imagined. Meanwhile, the person connected to this story was wrestling with another question. Not whether they cared. That answer had become clear. The real question was whether they were prepared to be vulnerable. Because truth requires vulnerability. It asks us to remove the masks we have worn for protection. It asks us to speak honestly even when outcomes are uncertain. It asks us to trust that sincerity is stronger than fear. That evening, they found themselves standing near a window. Watching darkness settle outside. Thinking about roads not taken. Words not spoken. Moments that could never be relived. And suddenly, a thought appeared. Simple. Yet impossible to ignore. What if waiting any longer creates more regret than speaking honestly ever could? The question lingered. It followed them into the next morning. It remained through the afternoon. It stayed with them late into the evening. And eventually, it became impossible to dismiss. Because deep inside, they knew something. Life offers many opportunities. But some opportunities arrive only once. Some people enter our lives carrying lessons. Others enter carrying blessings. And sometimes, if we are fortunate, one person carries both. That realization created a sense of urgency they had never felt before. Not panic. Not fear. Urgency born from clarity. The kind of clarity that arrives when confusion finally begins to fade. But that was not the moment that changed everything. The moment that changed everything occurred the very next day. A message was received. Unexpected. Unplanned. Brief. Yet powerful enough to alter the direction of every thought they had been having. The message itself was simple. Almost ordinary. Most people would have overlooked it. But they could not. Because hidden inside those few words was something they had been searching for without realizing it. Confirmation. A sign that the chapter they believed had ended might not be over after all. And once they saw it, their heart responded immediately. The hesitation that had controlled them for so long began to loosen its grip. The doubts that once felt overwhelming started losing their power. For the first time in a very long while, hope felt stronger than fear. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because after reading that message, they made a choice. Not a final choice. Not yet. But the first step toward one. A step that set events into motion. A step that would eventually lead to a truth being spoken aloud. A truth that has remained hidden through every silence, every delay, and every unanswered question. But before they could reveal it, before they could say what had been resting on their heart for so long, someone unexpectedly entered the situation. Someone carrying information. Someone carrying concerns. And someone carrying a secret that could either bring everything together or change the entire story forever. The moment they began speaking, the room fell silent. Because the first words out of their mouth were. I think there is something all of you need to understand. The room became still. Not with tension. Not with fear. But with anticipation. There was something in their voice that immediately captured everyone's attention. A calm certainty. The kind that appears when someone has spent a long time observing in silence. No one interrupted. No one rushed them. Everyone simply listened. And what they shared next began revealing pieces of the story that had remained hidden for far too long. They spoke about patterns. About moments others had overlooked. About conversations that seemed insignificant at the time. They described small details that, when viewed separately, meant very little. But together, they formed a picture. A picture that was becoming impossible to ignore. The more they spoke, the clearer things became. Because what they had noticed was not merely affection. It was respect. And respect is often the foundation upon which the strongest relationships are built. Attraction can capture attention. Emotion can create excitement. But respect creates endurance. It survives difficult seasons. It survives misunderstandings. It survives time itself. And according to this person, that respect had never disappeared. It had simply remained unspoken. The room remained quiet. Thoughtful. Reflective. Almost as though everyone present was reviewing old memories through a completely different lens. Then another observation was shared. One that carried even greater weight. They pointed out that every time your name surfaced, something changed. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Yet consistently. A pause. A softened expression. A shift in tone. A look that lasted slightly longer than expected. The kinds of things people notice only when they are paying very close attention. And they had been paying attention. For much longer than anyone realized. Meanwhile, the person at the center of this story remained silent. Listening. Processing. Feeling emotions they could no longer deny. Because hearing another person describe what was happening inside your own heart can be a powerful experience. Sometimes it confirms truths we already know. Sometimes it reveals truths we have been avoiding. This moment did both. And suddenly, years of confusion began giving way to understanding. If this sounds familiar. If you have ever wondered why certain connections continue returning to your thoughts despite every effort to move on. Perhaps it is because some chapters are not meant to be forced closed. Perhaps some stories require patience before their meaning becomes clear. Perhaps some answers arrive only after enough growth has occurred on both sides. And growth has been happening. Far more than anyone realizes. Not only within them. Within you as well. Think about how much you have survived. Think about the disappointments you have carried. The prayers you have whispered. The strength you discovered when you believed none remained. You are not the same person who once waited anxiously for every answer. There is more wisdom within you now. More peace. More understanding. And that transformation matters. Because meaningful connections require more than emotion. They require readiness. And readiness cannot be rushed. Yet what happened next was never meant to be revealed so soon. Because after the conversation ended, something unexpected occurred. Someone approached them privately. Someone who had listened quietly throughout the discussion. Someone who had said very little until now. They waited until everyone else had left. Then they spoke. Their words were gentle. But their impact was immediate. You already know what your heart is trying to tell you. That single sentence landed with incredible force. Not because it introduced new information. Because it removed every remaining excuse. Sometimes we search endlessly for certainty. Yet deep down, we already possess the answer. We simply fear what acknowledging it might require. That was the position they now found themselves in. Standing at a crossroads. One path led back toward familiar silence. The other required honesty. Courage. Vulnerability. And perhaps healing. For a long moment they said nothing. Then they asked a question. A question that revealed just how much they had been carrying. What if it's too late? The response came immediately. Without hesitation. Without doubt. And those words would remain with them long afterward. Because the answer was not focused on timing. It was focused on truth. Truth has a way of finding its moment. Not always quickly. Not always easily. But often when people are finally prepared to receive it. That answer brought unexpected comfort. Not certainty about the future. But peace about the next step. And peace can be far more powerful than certainty. Because peace allows movement. Peace allows faith. Peace allows courage to grow. Over the following days, subtle changes began appearing. Small decisions. Small actions. Small shifts in perspective. Nothing dramatic. Yet each step carried them closer to a moment they once believed might never come. A moment when hidden feelings would no longer remain hidden. A moment when unanswered questions would finally begin receiving answers. A moment when silence would give way to honesty. But just as everything seemed to be moving forward, a discovery was made. Unexpected. Unplanned. And deeply personal. Something connected to the past. Something that had remained buried beneath years of assumptions. Something that explained far more than anyone realized. The discovery did not create fear. It created understanding. Suddenly, actions that once seemed confusing began making sense. Choices that appeared distant began revealing their true purpose. And for the first time, they understood why so many delays had occurred. Why certain conversations never happened. Why certain feelings remained hidden. Why everything unfolded the way it did. The truth was far more complicated. And far more meaningful than anyone had imagined. And when they finally uncovered the final piece of that hidden story, they realized there was one person who deserved to hear it first. One person who had unknowingly been connected to every chapter. One person whose reaction mattered more than anything else. You. So they began preparing for a conversation that could change everything. Not because it would erase the past. Not because it would instantly solve every question. But because it would finally reveal the truth. Yet just before that conversation could begin, they received one final piece of information. A piece of information so unexpected that it completely transformed what they planned to say. And when they read those words, their eyes filled with emotion. Because the message revealed